Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Lamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uwayama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, August 6th, and we got a bit of bad news yesterday, Jamie. Charles Jagusah out for the season. Left tackle, starting left tackle Charles Jagusah out for the season, tore his pectoral muscle in practice. And he is lost for the year, which is a big blow for the Notre Dame offense, a big blow for the offensive line. We're going to have to get into that today. We're also going to get a little bit of Deuce Knight talk. It looks like he's set to leave the class. The hits keep on coming from Notre Dame, both on the recruiting trail and on the football team. So we got a lot to talk about. Offensive line coach Joe Rudolph, he met with the media today and talked about steps forward. So Jamie and I are going to cover that as well. So I am on location. I'm on vacation. I'm at a beach house in Southern California. Jamie is also in a separate location. But we're hitting and hustling today. We got to bring you the info. It's always kind of touch and go whether we record these shows while we're in different places, especially when I'm on location. But big news hits like this, we make it happen for everyone. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so you know whenever it is we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, this show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing. Founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang, you've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2024. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, I got to tell you, I was so as we were talking about before the show, I'm at my daughter's soccer tournament this weekend, and we were getting ready to play the semifinals, right? So it's a really big tournament for her team. So we're getting ready to play the semis, and we're standing there, and everyone's kind of tense. And I look at my phone, and everyone's blowing me up. Like, it's like, this is terrible. Why do I even bother? Like, being a fan, nothing can go right all the time. And I'm thinking, okay, like, clearly someone got hurt. And so I open the Twitter machine. I see Matt says that Jagusah is out for the season. When you first heard the news, I'll get to my reaction. When you first heard the news, I'm wondering what your initial, like, visceral reaction to it was, how you kind of felt about it.
Welp was my initial first reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be honest, I had heard about it on the weekend before, so I already knew before.
Okay.
I was just kind of waiting for the to see, but that it was potentially something that he got hurt, and we'll see what happens, whatever, right? So, but I was anticipating it, but the thing was Welp, like, that was not great. It's certainly not a position where you would want to lose such a critical player.
Yeah.
And then I think just with where they're at on the offensive line, period, there's different years, it'd be a completely different story, right? So I think if you looked at, like, well, if Zach Martin went down in 2013, well, we can shift Ronnie Stanley over. And, in 2015, Mike McGlinchey, right? And yes, you have to play next guy in, but there were options. Or, like, Leon Eichenberg gets his eye poked in the really bad in the Florida State game. They shift Aaron Banks over during the game, and he was fine, and if they had to play him long term, Aaron Banks would have been probably not as good as Eichenberg, but still pretty good,
Yeah.
And they just don't have that depth this year, because it's kind of just how it is with the transition year, where if it happened last year, yes, losing Joe Alt would be a massive, massive loss. And Alt is obviously a better player, a more established player than Jagusah, but, like, you had Blake Fisher, right? And you had that kind of option there to kind of move over, and then you've got to figure out right tackle, but you at least kind of have that. And you were kind of coming into camp here, and it did seem like, yeah, they had settled with Emil Wagner at right tackle, and that was going to kind of be the anyways. But it wasn't something where you're putting in new starters there at both spots, so you're trying to transition and make that transition, and it just becomes that much harder now because you have to fill in. In saying that, just a reminder that there's everyone who's like the season's over. This would have been a much worse situation if it happened in the second quarter of the Texas A&M game.
Yeah.
In the Florida State in 2021 when Blake Fisher went down, right? So I realize it's not a good situation, but they at least have a month to kind of figure it out and kind of see where they're at. And it could have been worse in terms of timing. Also, think back to 2012. I mean, it sounds crazy now, but like Low Wood tearing his Achilles, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, that's just was a terrible thing for Notre Dame. They have no one at corner. Oh my gosh, they're going to play a freshman there. They're going to play a running back. Like, oh my, like what's?" And they ended up being okay, right? So, Kavari Russell played there, so we'll see what happens. It's certainly not ideal. It's not ideal at all.
So my initial reaction was obviously like, this is not good, right? It isn't. Like, it's not a good thing. It's not something the team wanted to have happen because they're already kind of like at guard. I feel like there's more options, right? Like to your point, like if something happens, let's say if something happens to Pat Coogan, it's like, well, you can play Spindler there because he played the whole year. Same thing with Billy Strauss. Like, granted, losing Billy Strauss, he might be their best offensive lineman this year. So losing your best one is obviously not good. But like you have someone who has played, right? So you've seen Rocco Spindler, he's played a ton. Pat Coogan's played a ton. You have an option there, like you said, with left tackle. It's like you don't really have a good option, right? Joe Rudolph said today they're gonna move Tosh Baker over to the left, and he's going to be the person, at least for now, right? And I think that the Tosh Baker move is maybe they want it to be a permanent solution, but it doesn't have to be, right? Let's say if Anthony Knapp, like they're obviously going to have to accelerate his development, because it's one thing to be the left tackle in a situation where you want to play Jagusah every snap, right? He's your first option. You want him to be the guy, right? So it's one thing to and it's also pretty clear, like, Anthony Knapp was the second team left tackle, but like in reality, he isn't, because they moved someone over to another position, right? So, but now he is going to be the second team left tackle. Like, if something happens to Tosh Baker, he is going to be the one who comes in.
Or something happens to Emil Wagner. He's probably the next guy in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, his development is going to be accelerated. He's probably going to have a higher level of urgency at this point as well. So that's something to kind of keep in mind for him. But I feel like, as I thought about, and the good part about the fact that like it happened on a Monday and we don't normally record till Tuesday, it was good for me because I was able to just spend a lot of time thinking about it and thinking about, kind of what it means. And obviously you see the reaction. Like, a lot of people are just kind of emoting on whether it be Twitter or message boards and things like that. And my thought is, like, this is something that could derail the season in terms of, you're not going to go 11-1 or 12-0. Like, maybe you'll go like 9-3 or something, which what I would consider to be a derailment of the season in that situation. But it doesn't have to. It really doesn't have to, right? There are things that Tosh Baker can do, and we're going to get into that in just a second, about what his strengths are. And I think that's the key for Denbrock. That's the key for Joe Rudolph. And it's kind of to the point that you just made about when this happened. And there's something like I posted one thing on Twitter about this, and it's like the saving grace is when, right? When you have time to figure out, okay, how is this going to how can we build the offense now? And what are we going to do to accentuate the strengths that Tosh Baker has with the rest of the line, and then blend that with the strengths of what the offense can be, right? And that is their focus now, and they need to do that, and they can do that. They have plenty of time to do it. Tosh Baker is not young, right? He started the bowl game. He has started games before. He is not their first choice, right? He has limitations that you have talked about, that I have talked about, that we have noted in film. Like, he does have limitations, but there are things he can do, and they need to make this work. Now, I think there's a big picture upside to the season conversation that can be had, that is, I think, relevant to this. Like, in my opinion, like, law of averages just kind of dictates that, 13, 14 games with Tosh Baker as your left tackle, if that ends up being the case, like, that is going to be a fatal flaw to someone's title chances, in my opinion. Okay. But we're talking title chances, right? We're not talking, playoff chances, right? But I just think at some point, if that's your left tackle throughout the year, I just think that's going to get exposed at some point. That's law of averages, in my opinion. But that remains to be seen. Tell me about, or tell us, everyone who's listening, and thank you if you're listening. We appreciate that. Tell everyone how you feel about Tosh Baker and his strengths, and what he can add to the offense, how they can build an offense around him, how you would kind of accentuate what he can do and minimize the things that may be a weakness.
Well, I mean, as Adam Dowling points out in the thing, he's not the 2021 version of him. He's a better player. He's a better player now. And so you're thinking about the guy who was in the Sun Bowl. He wasn't great in the Sun Bowl or anything. He wasn't like, man, because if he was, then he would have been the right tackle. Like, if everybody kind of thought that he was unbelievable in it, that'd be a different story. I think you just see him. He's not, he doesn't have the best feet. He's 6'8". Right. He's 6'8". He plays high at times. That's certainly a case with a lot of guys who are 6'8". Guys like Alt, who can really bend in that way, that's rare, right? That's rare. But he is super long. He can use his length really well in pass pro. When he does, he's someone who can move people in the run game. When he can get after it, he could crush a guy on a down block, which isn't the kind of thing that people kind of thought that he could be. They thought he was going to be, this basketball player, agile left tackle, but he's really just grown into like a big kind of hulking dude who can really kind of move people at the point of attack. And whenever he's gotten a chance to play, and when you see him in practice, that's what he can do well, right? He can move people in the run game, which, I mean, that's going to be important anyways. Like that is going to be really important. But I think one of the things why Wagner was going to get the nod there at right tackle was because he's better in pass pro. He's better in pass pro. So I think when you're looking at it, left tackle compared to right tackle, it's not the same as kind of people. It used to be, right? Where everyone's like the blind side, whatever. It's like, no, it doesn't matter, right? Like, it's like, if your right tackle is a weakness, they're attacking that too. So it's not really that. It's not really that part of it that is going to be the problem. It's just that they're probably going to have to worry about kind of helping him more against certain pass rushers. I mean, certainly in this game, when it's an obvious passing down, they're probably going to have to line up the tight end on his side quite a bit. They're going to have to chip with the back quite a bit. When it's like Nick Gordon, they're going to have to whether it's the center or the left guard, is going to have to probably help a little bit when they're, depending on what, if it's like a 4-man rush or whatever, right? Like that's something that's they're going to have to be kind of aware of. But so much is going to depend on whether or not they run the football well. Because if you can run the football well with him and you're not doing as many straight dropbacks, you're going to kind of take away some of the stuff that he could get, where he can get exposed.
Yeah.
So, play action, RPOs, quick game, some of that kind of stuff. I think you look at back to the 2021 offense and kind of what they did, where all of a sudden the air yards dropped significantly of what they're doing because they were getting the ball out quicker. They were doing some of these other things. And yeah, that does kind of limit what you can kind of do with some of the downfield passing stuff. So, I mean, that could hurt, right? Now, that might also be a thing where you wanted to play more 11, and they will play quite a bit 11, but maybe going to play a little bit more 12 because you need some help there in certain situations, right? And so I think that's something to kind of think about. I mean, you got to remember, like, Emil Wagner is coming out and he's, for the first time, going to have to go out and block some of these guys too. So, I mean, tackle was already going to be a question mark with Jagusah coming out and whatever. Like, I think I didn't expect Jagusah to be great. I thought Jagusah, very high percentage, he was not going to be good against Texas A&M in pass pro.
For sure. Yeah.
So I don't think it will be maybe as big of a difference in that way as you see, but you wanted to get to a point where it's later in the season where you feel comfortable, where you're like, yeah, this guy's getting better. And that obviously could happen with Baker. But, he is in year 5. He started 3 games in his career, and really, is because of, an opt-out in the bowl game and injury. So he didn't earn a starting job on his own. So that's kind of one of the reasons why you could see a younger tackle kind of eventually take over that job at some point. I think it would be a lot to ask to have one of those guys start against Texas A&M. But if they are that much better in camp, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to play that guy.
Yeah. And the point you made, we've kind of both made about the timing of this thing. Like, everyone looks at 2021, right? And you just referenced it in terms of what they were able to do, and getting the ball out quickly. Like you said, the air yards could significantly drop. They became a very heavy RPO team with Jack Cohn. But that didn't happen until, I guess, week 6 or whatever it might be, after the bye, against, and really, like, I mean, during the Virginia Tech game where they kind of had to. At the end,
he first took over. Alt first took over in the Virginia Tech game as a start of the game, but at half of the Cincinnati game, that was when he basically became the starter.
Yeah, and it's like that just kind of accentuates the point of, like, Blake Fisher went down in the second quarter of the first game, and they had all camp, and in camp they had, this is Blake, this is what we're doing, this is going to be our situation, and then they lost him in the middle of a game, and then it took them 3 or 4 weeks to figure out, okay, what exactly do we want to do here? And Notre Dame they can have that 3 or 4 weeks in camp. They don't have to go through the struggles of an actual season and figure out how they want to deal with this, right? And so that's Notre Dame's benefit. I think someone had put the post in. Jacob Paulus asked the question: any chance Anthony Knapp beats out Baker? Seems crazy to suggest a true freshman beat out a senior for left tackle, but he has really flashed, especially in the blue gold game. There is a chance of that. Like, there absolutely is, because to your point, Jamie, Baker's never won a job in a situation where he's had the opportunity to win a job. He's played because of, like you said, an opt-out and because of injury. right? That's why he's been in the lineup. So he's never actually won a starting position at Notre Dame. And you have referenced on this show countless times. He looks like an NFL player, and if you look like one, and you're built like one, and you're not earning starting positions, there's obviously some weaknesses there, right? That the coaches can't get past, right? So I don't want to, I don't think neither of us want to, sugarcoat this and be like, maybe he's actually great, right? He's had plenty of time to show that he was a great player. As you just noted, there are strengths there, but there's the opportunity for Anthony Knapp to eventually become, Notre Dame starter are not. It's out there. The opportunity for him is out there, and he's going to have that opportunity. I think what you just talked about, playing more 12. When you're in 11, using that tight end to chip. I think this is when, the thing that the advantage Notre Dame has with playing A&M first is that A&M doesn't know how Notre Dame is going to utilize their personnel, especially with respect to, how they're going to use their tight ends to chip or protect their left side, and on and on. As the season goes on, teams will be able to scout that, and they'll be able to take advantage of that, right? The other thing you're doing is like, you don't want to, if you're taking Mitchell Evans and using him as a chipper, well, obviously that's Notre Dame's best receiving tight end, one of the best receiving tight ends in the nation, and now you're not using him in the pass game. That's a disadvantage. If you are putting Mitchell Evans split out somewhere and using another tight end, well, now you're taking off one of Notre Dame's wide receivers, right? Be it, Greathouse, Harrison, Faison, whoever it may be, right? And we look at them as those are the weapons that are going to make Notre Dame a powerful offensive team. That makes them worse, right? So it's not just a one for one, taking out one player and putting in another player and everything else stays the same. There's knock-on effects to this sort of thing that remain to be seen, but it takes away from what you want to be as an offense. And that's kind of why I look at like big long-term, just like ceiling of that. You never want to be limited to what you can do offensively. And it seems like, in my opinion, that is the biggest thing. It just kind of limits what they want to do. And that's not how you want to play offense. Another part of this that is less so this year, but more so just moving forward. This was a huge season for Charles Jagusah, the person, the player. He's missing all these reps now. He's missing a whole year of reps. Notre Dame's going to go into 2025 not really knowing what they have with him, right? When you're not playing, you're not developing, right? I feel like that's kind of a big piece of this as well. So I guess what is your kind of take on that?
Well, I think no matter his injury or not, they're still going to be high on him, that he's going to be a guy that is going to be a good player for them. It's just more of, but you miss those reps. Those are important. They're very important. Like, cause he's going to go from a guy who would come back as a returning starter to now he's got to go and win a job again. And, it also could mean that he's not the left tackle next year.
Yeah.
Right. And it's somebody else, whether it's Anthony Knapp or Gerby Lambert, or maybe like a true freshman like Will Black or whoever, right? Like it could be that, right? Like that's something that could happen. But I mean, I think the way you got to look at it for him is just, it really, really sucks for him that he's going to miss these reps and these chances. But he still has 3 years after this. I think he's going to be a good player for Notre Dame. Last year, when he first arrived, he was repping at guard when he first arrive too. So that is a fact. I saw some people were getting some arguments over whether or not he's a guard or a tackle again too, which, yeah, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But he took reps at right guard, in the last fall camp. So if they come out of this season and they really like whoever is at left tackle, maybe that means that Jagusah's going to be a guy at guard, and he's going to be the guy who, competes there. Could happen. But if they don't like what they see out of it, he could be like, okay, well, here's now, Charles, guess what? You get a chance to win the job again, right? So I think you kind of just got to wait and see where they're at. It definitely, I mean, it hurts. It hurts him and Notre Dame for the future in terms of he was going to be a guy who was seen as a building block for these next few years. Yeah. And now, not to say that he still won't be a building block, but he just stays at the same level. I mean, mentally, yes, he'll pick stuff up and whatever, but he can't really improve on, the things he did because he's just not going to be repping it up.
Yeah. And so that's, unfortunate for him. And so kind of my last point on this specific topic is, Mike Denbrock's one of the highest paid offensive coordinators in the country, for a reason, right? He's earned that, obviously. I think this can't be the reason that Notre Dame is not a good team. This can't be the reason that they're maybe their floor, is maybe lower, I guess, just as a matter of fact. But that shouldn't be in play, in my opinion, because of this specific thing. You have to find a way to create a good offense with what they have. I think they have enough to create a good offense. And I think part of this, too, is, the offensive line was always going to be something that they had to, I don't want to say scheme against, but like they could never just do whatever they wanted because of the offensive line, right? Like that wasn't the case. Like they did have to be careful with those tackles regardless. Just like you said before, like Charles Jagusah was probably going to struggle, especially in the opener, as a pass blocker, right? And so they had to come up with something, right? Regardless of who the tackle was. And so now you still have to do that. Like all of the reasons why we thought Notre Dame could be a good offense and an explosive offense still exist. And so they need to be able to work around this, right? Like this is what coaches do. This is what coaching is. It's figuring out your strengths, playing to your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses and creating a good situation, right? And so that's what they need to do here. Like this whole, like, I don't want to say doomsday thing. Like not everyone's doing that, right? Some people are a little bit, more level-headed about this. Some people are a little bit more kind of, negative about the whole situation. To me, it's like, look, this is a problem that needs to be fixed. It needs to be solved. And they need to go be a good football team on offense, right? And I don't think that this singular injury is a reason to, fully, it's like I was going to take the over on Notre Dame 10.5. I'm going to take the under. Like, I don't think this is something that they need to completely we need to rethink what Notre Dame is. Like, I don't think that's true, right? And I don't view it like that. And I'm wondering if that was kind of your main takeaway as well.
Oh, 100%. I think you couldn't get a worse situation than 2021 at left tackle was the absolute worst case scenario that I've ever seen at any position for Notre Dame. Yeah. I've never seen that where they have to play. They start 4 tackles in the first 6 games, like, or 4 left tackles. Like, when has that ever happened? Ever at any position where they've started 4 corners or 4, like that has never happened anywhere where they've had that kind of injury luck and where they couldn't find the right guy there. And they went at 11. They went 11-1. Against, and yes, it wasn't a great schedule, but this schedule isn't the toughest schedule either. I would say the one difference between this schedule and now is that you have A&M, Louisville, Florida State. Those defensive lines, I think, you could all put them wherever you want to rank them, whatever. Like, I think top 10 to 20 defensive lines in the country. They're filled with NFL dudes on those lines, specifically edge guys, right? So those games are always going to be difficult games that you're going to have to, have success in those games. But 2022 against Clemson was a game where they were like, man, this was going to be how's Notre Dame thing? And then they ran it down their throats. And I mean, and anyone who said they predicted that was either an incredible homer or a liar, right? Like, so that wasn't, no one predicted that. I think kind of bringing it back to something you brought up earlier, you could say that Notre Dame was going to be in a bad spot anyways in terms of when they get when you get to the playoff time and the teams you're going to play there, because you just weren't sure how good the offensive line was. Because you have to have, in order to like really win it all, you need like a Joe Moore level finalist, semifinalist. You need one to have one of the top offensive lines in the country. And I don't know if they were going to get there this year, right? Probably next year. I think there's a good chance, but maybe not this year anyways. So it doesn't change that much. Maybe the ceiling isn't as high without Jagusah. I think that's more than fair to say. But I don't think it doesn't kill the season. I don't believe that at all, one bit.
I mean, it's not like the left tackle situation in 2021 was what it was, and it was awful, right? And then that got figured out. And oh, by the way, like then they lost Kyle Hamilton in the second series against USC. They lost him for the rest of the year, and you still had that rest of the USC game. And then you had North Carolina with Sam Howell and that offense. And they found a way to win those games. Like Kyle Hamilton, he was their best player on the team in 2021. And you lose him for half the year, and then you just keep going, right? But again, to that point, eventually, he didn't play in the bowl game. And obviously that caught up with them at some point, right? And so I think that this situation could be similar in that you have a good team. Jim Scales says Kyle could have played left tackle in a pinch. I think at this point he absolutely could. I wouldn't put it past him. He's good at everything. But it's just like coaches always find ways to handle problems and solve problems, right? But again, that goes back to
their job. Yeah,
that's their job, right? And you've seen it, and I've seen it. We've all seen it, right? So this is just a problem that needs to be solved by Notre Dame and their coaching staff, and it is what it is, right? And you want to solve the problem of having a media company that's not really working for you, and that's a problem for you. Then you need to upgrade as well. And so go to VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Jamie, the Bruce Feldman Freaks list came out today.
It did.
Riley Mills featured again. He's been featured. I know he was last year. I don't know about the year before. But
just last year was the first time. Yeah,
he's a returning guest on the on the Freaks list, but someone who made the Freaks list, wide receiver Bo Collins. Apparently, he's got like a lightning like a legit vertical, like 41.5 inches or whatever it might be. Um, I put out on Twitter, we're officially monitoring the Bo Collins situation. You've noticed his explosiveness and his twitch, I believe was the word you used. Um, I'm keeping my eye on that, right? Like it just I'm all any and all reports about him being a playmaker out there for Notre Dame. I feel like his athletic ability could be a kind of a difference maker for Notre Dame in their deep ball game, especially if you have him and Chris Mitchell on opposite sides. We saw a deep ball from Riley Leonard throwing to Chris Mitchell on a go route. Obviously dropped right in the bucket. Chris Mitchell makes the play and scores a touchdown over Jaden Mickey. What are you what's caught your eye so far in terms of what you've seen? You know, maybe something that you noticed, you didn't really mention, but you just kind of keep my eye on it. And then there have been further reports about it where it's like, I think this might be a thing I want to bring up. Or what else is are you monitoring thus far through camp?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's anything in particular that I am monitoring that I didn't mention previously. Like I will say, oh, well, okay, maybe we've kind of talked about it, but I'm definitely monitoring those two young corners. You know, Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore. Jordan Clark was talking about Leonard Moore, or not Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs, because Carson Hobbs has been working as nickel, and you know, and he was saying he is like a ultra confident kid. He is very, very confident. He is one of these guys who's really smart and really, you know, he thinks he belongs and he acts like he belongs there. And I think that is one of those things that's like, if you don't have that right away as a freshman, then you're not going to belong. You know, it's not going to happen for you. And it's not to say that it means he's going to play for sure. But that is something that, you know, when someone is doing that and when they're, you know, looking good, like he looked good in the first few days when I watched him. I think that's a positive sign. And obviously, too, you mentioned Leonard Moore last week when we were talking about it. He obviously had the pick in one clip that they shared as well. I think both those guys look like can be players for Notre Dame. And whether or not that's true or not, they don't really have to be necessarily players. They just got to be depth, really. And I think they look like they have the potential to provide that. So, I mean, that's something that we kind of talked about as a key, that like the depth was key. You know, I know Matt has you know, preached like that's going to be really, really important. Obviously, you know, not a lot of people have a ton of confidence in Chance Tucker right now, and kind of, you know, what kind of depth he can provide. But I think those guys look like they can play in a pinch if they have to. And, you know, they got to develop, they got to keep growing, and we'll see where they're at the end of spring. But it's exciting. Like it's exciting to kind of see where they're at. And I would say too, I would mention too that, and it's something that Mike mentioned, you know, when they were talking to Al Washington today after, I think I'm monitoring the depth on the defensive line, which I already thought was really good, and I was pretty confident about. But I think, you know, it always happens. There's always someone who's like a new shining toy in Bryce Young, and you know, he looks like just physically just super impressive. There's not many defensive ends that Notre Dame signs that are like him, that are like that tall, that long. He's got the twitch and all that, but you don't want to anoint him until you kind of see more. That was like something with like Isaiah Foskey, where everyone was like, man, this guy's impressive. And people kind of anointed that he was going to be this thing. And it was more of a slow, steady thing for him. Obviously, he had the one big punt block against Stanford at the end of the year, but that was kind of it in the, you know, his little 4-game thing. But, you know, the fact that we talked about Armel Mukum as like a guy who's kind of like stepping up there and showing that he can play. He definitely has potential. Like he has not played a lot of football. He has not played a lot of football. And you got to remember he missed the spring too. So he has had less reps than even the guys on campus. So he has so much room to grow, and he's got massive lower body. He's got a big legs. He's a big dude, and next to Jason Onye, he's certainly not as cut up as Jason Onye, not even close, but like he has a very similar frame to Jason Onye. And I think everyone would look at Jason Onye and be like, that guy has an NFL frame. And that's the same with Armel Mukum. And so him, Josh Burnham, who was like not a guy, who's, I think people think that he's going to play, but he's maybe not getting the hype of someone else. But like, Washington said he's having a great camp and that he's really stepped up. And like, he's done so much to get so much bigger, where before, if he stood next to Junior Tui Halamaka, they were like same size. And now you can see there's a noticeable difference between the two.
Yeah.
And that's, something that you'd see. Like he's just really taking a big step in terms of his physical development and just like his technical development. And then like, everybody's excited about Boubacar, but then the fact is Jordan Botelho too is like, looks like a different thing. Like I really like the defensive line, and someone kind of brought it up on IST's board. Everybody's talking about it, and more people are going to be talking about Texas A&M's D-line versus Notre Dame's O-line in this game. I don't think Texas A&M's going to have a fun time blocking Notre Dame's D-line. I think Notre Dame is – I think every offensive line that Notre Dame plays this year is going to have a tough time with their defensive line. They got too many good players, too much depth. I really like where they're at there.
Well, the waves, James. I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you can bring in waves like that, and it's not just there's a difference between, and I think in the past, Notre Dame's had guys who can take reps, but not guys who can win those reps, It's like, it's one thing to be able to go in there and hold your own. It's another thing to go in there and actually be a difference maker. And I feel like, I think kind of an undersold story, as you just mentioned, and like Jordan Botelho, like, I think that we were initially excited about him. Last year didn't go as well in terms of from an impact standpoint. And you kept bringing up like you think he's playing hurt in some kind of way. This year he looks a lot better, and he's been impressive, right? And it's just like, I don't think that fans and even me, like, I don't know what to make of him in terms of expectations, but if he's a difference maker, and Boubacar can come in and be a difference maker, well, now you have multiple Vipers who can be effective, right? Which is great for both of them. Not just that, I mean, just the fact that like they have different skill sets as well. And then you have Oben on the other side with Burnham on the other side. Like there's just so many different ways. And I think that when you talk about the interior as well, when you take Howard Cross out of the game, or Riley Mills, and you feel like, all right, we're going to get a break from this, and maybe you won't, right? And I think, that is a huge, like, look, anytime you have a good D-line, I mean, when has Notre Dame had like a really good D-line and not been a good team, right? The two things are just kind of synonymous. And so I think that's huge. I think another thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on is a Don Schuler, right? Like he seems to be someone who is, we talk a lot about you make them play you make them put you on the field. And I think he's kind of meeting that. Like, I think he's kind of going with that standard of like, I'm going to play. You brought in Rod Hurd, and that's great. I'm playing on this team, and I'm going to play a lot. And it seems like he has that purpose and that intensity to the way that he goes about the sport, which is obviously great for the defensive backfield. And then you continue to hear good things about Ben Morrison, and I know that it's like he's a given, but because of the injury, I think people had a lot of questions. It just seems like that's going really well right now. So he's kind of picked up, where you'd expect him to. And I think like every time, man, I tell you, every time I see Christian Gray in drills, Jamie, I just think, gosh, that is a prototypical build that you want from your corner. I mean, he's long. Those arms are just so long, and he's a strider. He's a great athlete. He just seems like the type of guy. If he gets his hands on you, you're in big trouble because of the arm length and the reach, and the fact that like that arm length. And this is something that Ben Morrison has as well. He has very long arms. Even when you feel like, oh, I have a step, because of the length, they kind of negate that, right? Like they don't have to be hip to hip to negate the fact that they can get their hands in the way. I think there's a lot of good things going on for the roster right now, aside from, the offensive line question, which is why people are, I don't want to say panic, but you don't want that to be a spoiler for, a season that looks like the rest of the roster is really, really coming together. One thing that's not coming together right now is Notre Dame's 2025 recruiting class, Shane. It looks like Deuce Knight is going to be moving on, and I got to tell you, you can mark this one down in the nothing matters category of our godfather, our consigliere, Mike Frank. He's a big, not what they say, look at what they do guy. All Deuce Knight did was take visits to Notre Dame. That was all he did. And everything else was just like talking to other schools. And it's like, it's one thing to be talking. It's another thing to actually be, making visits and things like that. I mean,
well, then he took visits.
What do you mean?
Well, then he
well,
was.
now he's
just
taking
talking,
visits,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But like before that, it was just talk. And then he took visits. And then it just went from, I'm going to Auburn to, or I'm going to go Auburn, I'm going to Ole Miss, and now I'm getting ready to leave the class. And there was always chatter about him, but like his behavior was incredibly consistent with visiting Notre Dame and being around Notre Dame, going on retreats with the current team and Riley Leonard and TJ Carr and the wide receivers. I mean, and now it's just gone. And then he takes the visit. Once he took the visits, obviously that was a huge red flag. And we talked about it. Like, this is an uncommitted recruit, and now it looks like he's set to leave the class. It's just, you can't, you just got to take recruiting as it comes at this point, right? Like, there are so many different factors, signs that you could point to in hindsight. I mean, what is your take on this? I mean, the Auburn thing, I get they must have some, because here's the other thing. Maybe there's an NIL component to this. I just don't think that Notre Dame is getting beaten on NIL solely here. Obviously, Auburn's got something going on because they just haven't been a good program. And yet,
well, they've always paid. I mean, before there was NIL, they've always paid.
For sure. But like now,
Cam Newton,
not really.
We know that Cam Newton went there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the differentiator that it has been. Because of other schools. But so, like, I guess, what do you make of the whole thing?
One, someone said that he hasn't been to Notre Dame. Well, I mean, he was at Notre Dame in June for a long time.
Yeah,
he came to Notre Dame's Irish Invasion to throw. He came earlier to take part in like the golf tournament little thing. He was like hanging out with other commits and like throwing to possible receivers. He also took his official visit after. Like, he's been in Notre Dame. It wasn't that long ago. The only thing he didn't go to the barbecue, but then he was basically, I think the only way to take it is that as soon as Derek Meadows didn't commit, he was like, well, no. I think that's really the only way to take it, because he was like, oh, they're not getting the receivers. They didn't get Meadows, they didn't get Dylan Robinson. They struck out on all the receivers, right? So, and that, I think that was ultimately the nail in the coffin. That doesn't mean he wouldn't have flipped later on either, because it could have happened. It also doesn't mean that he might not. Well, first of all, he hasn't officially flipped yet publicly. But when people are throwing out whatever, it means he basically told them I'm coming or whatever, or that's kind of where it's at. Purdue, if you look at like who they got in the class, they have a really, really good class. They signed Cam Coleman in the previous class too. Like they've got a ton of talent. Also, it is like extremely close to where he lives. It's like a 90-minute drive to where he lives. Matt pointed this out. It's closer than Ole Miss, so to where he is. So, I mean, that's definitely part of it. But I don't know how there's any other way to read into it other than, Notre Dame. The one thing that he was consistent with is that, I'm keeping it open because it was like this is a business decision, and he obviously thought that. Because none of he never took these visits. He never did any of this stuff until Notre Dame struck out at receiver. So I think you could blame that. I really don't think there's anything else you can blame because Notre Dame literally did everything right. I mean, he's on 1 million visits. Obviously, he's not paying for all those visits. You know what I mean? Like that's just he's going to, like you said, the retreat into Alabama. He's doing all of these things. He's taking part. He was recruiting for the class too. And I know people will want to say, well, these quarterbacks, like there maybe some of the receivers were like, I don't want, Deuce isn't fully committed. So that's a knock against Notre Dame. I think, I think it's a possibility that was the case. He didn't help with that. But he did everything to show that he was committed, and Notre Dame did everything to kind of make him like a showcase person in the class until, just this past couple weeks, really. And then he just took the visits, and it's not like there's no way he has a better relationship with the coaches at Auburn than he does at Notre Dame. It's not a relationship thing. Yes, I mean, I heard he got offered a ton at Auburn, but he was going to get a ton at Notre Dame too. So, and at that point too, it's not about like you're getting so much money. Whatever, who cares? He was getting wherever he goes, he was going to get money. So that wasn't going to be the thing with him. I just think ultimately it was like, he's thinking of it in his terms of like, well, where maybe that the fact that CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie were in front of him, maybe it didn't bother him before, or he's thinking about it, but he didn't really. But like, I mean, I can tell you Auburn doesn't have those guys in front of him too. So maybe that's part of his business decision. But like, I don't know, but I would say too, like, with those kind of guys, especially with these SEC guys, he could flip on signing it to Ole Miss. He could flip on signing it to Notre Dame. Like, that could happen. Like, that isn't out of it. So, I mean, Notre Dame obviously should move on and try to get somebody else in the interim. Like, and, if as expected, he ultimately flips to Auburn. But, like, it's just one of those things where they were going to have to battle it out for him all the way. It's probably better. It's just like no one wants to hear it, but it's better to lose him now than it would have been in November.
Yeah.
So they can at least have a shot to kind of get established relationships too. But you just don't know how it's going to play out with any of these guys, because they could have got Walker Howard later, but he couldn't get into school, right? In that 1 year, right? So
yeah,
it's just, you gotta kind of wait and see how it all plays out. It's just one of these. It's a tough situation for Notre Dame because I really think that they did a good job. And if he's your top guy, and he was their top guy from like forever, for basically a couple years, And they had him committed. He was doing all these things, and then he goes out. And I mean, the same thing could happen to USC with Juju Lewis too, right? Like, I mean, he's been flirting with people all the way, and obviously USC has lost a ton of commitments too. And I don't think they have really strong wide receiver class either, right? So it's that's crude. That's what it is.
Yeah. I think when I was in sales, we had a term called shadow objections, which is basically like objections that people would voice, but it's like, that's not really why you're not doing this, you know? And I think for Duce and the receivers piece, like they didn't land these receivers or whatever. I think in my mind, it sounds like a shadow objection to me. Like something you would say, like, well, I don't know about this receiver class, you know? In my opinion, and this is just, it's just based on my impressions. It's just like Duce thought he was going to be different. I'm going to be from Mississippi and I'm going to go to Notre Dame and I'm going to do the different thing. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone. And I think as time went on, he felt like, I'm just not that guy. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's for me. And that's how it's played out. I mean, Auburn wasn't even on him. They weren't even recruiting him. They were on Juju Lewis this whole time. I mean, you're leaving Notre Dame, like you said. Notre Dame did everything right. They were on him early. They were on him before he blew up. And they've been on him this whole time. And Auburn comes in. They weren't talking to him. Hadn't even visited until July. And then he wants to pop for them, right? So that's just my impression, you know? And it is what it is, right? And Notre Dame's going to have to rebound. They're going to have to find someone else. They're going to have to find some more wideouts. You know, I like the tight ends. I like the offensive line on offense. I mean, look, we both like Elijah Burris as a prospect. It can't just be him, right? We don't know that Bettis is even going to be a wide receiver in college. He says, yeah, maybe he's a better defensive back. I don't know. Notre Dame's got to figure out something with their skill positions on offense. And, shocking that they're in this position, especially when like they do such a good job on the transfer market, right? Like they got Sam Hartman to come, and they got Riley Leonard to come, right? And they got these wide receivers to come. So there's a disconnect there. They got to figure out what's going on. Like you have Bo Collins and Jaden Harrison trusting their careers basically to their development at Notre Dame at wide receiver, and somehow they can't translate those same things to high school players. So there's a disconnect there. They've got to figure that out. So, all right, Jamie, that's going to do it for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. We'll see you on Thursday, right? Obviously, I'm on vacation. If I can get away, I got it. My wife she was fine today because it's like big breaking news with Charles Jagusah, but she doesn't love the vacation podcast. So I'm going to have to figure that out. We're going to try to do a show. My setup here is good. So I don't know. We'll see going forward. Stay tuned in. Whatever it is, stay locked in to IrishSportsDaily.com. Tons of information going up on the site. Mike was at practice today. Matt was at practice today. They've got practice reports coming up. Matt's going to have video as well. So check out IrishSportsDaily.com for all your practice report updates. It's going to be a good time. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.